So, Pokemon, huh? Do you know it's the highest grossing media franchise of all time? Yeah. It actually beats out Mickey Mouse, Star Wars, Harry Potter, Call of Duty. I knew it was big, but 10th? Damn. But it's no wonder it's done so well. In its catalogue of over 1,000 different characters, there's really something for everyone. There's your cool goobers, there's your cute goobers, there's your spooky goobers. But what we're looking at today is the legendary goobers. Or so they're called. Legendary Pokemon are supposed to be powerful, special, divine, elusive, imperative to the world around them. They command nature, rise above the rest, and they're catalysts to major events. So, with titles like that, you'd expect them to be few. Because if everybody's super, nobody's super. With this in mind, the total number of legendary and mythical Pokemon is 95! When did this happen? Don't you remember when we had 5 of them? I know there's meant to be more in coming generations, but what's this? Alright, I need to do something about this. So, with this daunting number in front of us, I think it's finally time to ask, which legendary Pokemon actually deserves to be legendary, and which don't? I've divided all 95 legendaries into 5 different sections. Could be regular Pokemon, they're special but not quite legendary, passes, a true legendary, and legendary among legendaries. I'm going to be delegating each of them into each tier based on the criteria that I've set that will determine whether they deserve to be a legendary. The first and most important piece of criteria is how much of an impact do they have on the world and lore. It is imperative that a legendary has some sort of importance in the world or the timeline of the Pokemon universe. Whether they represent a fundamental aspect of the world around them, or they're the cause of a major event in the timeline, or something else major. I don't know, I think you get the gist. Next is a simple one. How unique are they? This refers to both their abilities and just their existence. You know, meaning that there aren't too many of them. Now, for the most part, a lot of legendaries only have one of them, or, I don't know, 2. But point is that there shouldn't be that many of them, unless they have a good reason for it. Do they have some unique abilities or traits? Or are they unique in some other way? Maybe not abilities, but origin or maybe skills. And my final, smaller bit of criteria, how powerful are they? Now, how powerful they are isn't a huge deal to me, as there are plenty of powerful Pokemon who aren't legendary. Think Garchomp, Dragonite, Metagross. But it certainly helps to have a certain bit of power behind them, especially when it is an overwhelming amount of power, which really supports the idea that they are something special. Legendary, you might even say. I won't be including Ultra Beasts, as they're just not legendaries, and I also won't be including Paradoxes. Because, well, paradoxes just shouldn't exist. That's the point of a paradox. So there's no point in debating whether something should be legendary if it shouldn't exist in the first place. However, there are 2 exceptions to the paradox rule. Without any further ado, take me to Bulbapedia. To begin, we are going to be starting from the bottom. This category suggests what it says on the tin, in that these Pokemon don't really have enough special about them to be considered anything but a regular Pokemon. These guys don't hold enough significance or uniqueness to really be held away from the culling of the status of legendary. So much so that if they were put into a different context, and maybe had their base stat total dropped, you wouldn't really bat an eye at someone for not calling them legendary. In other words, these guys are like your McChickens. They need better sauce. The first Pokemon to be judged is the rogue monkey Pokemon Zarude. And can I really ask you, what is legendary about this Pokemon? Other than the fact that hardly anyone knows it exists. I mean, it had a movie where we had this unique Zarude who took care of a child, but is taking care of a child really a legendary attribute? By that logic, all parents are legendary, and while that viewpoint is quite wholesome, I don't think it's very correct. And with the Zoroark and Lucario movies, having a movie doesn't immediately make you a legendary. I guess he has a signature move in jungle healing, but signature moves aren't exactly rare anymore. I suppose you could make a case with its Pokédex entry that it's incredibly aggressive and the other Pokemon of the forest fear it, which I guess it implies that it's powerful. But in the very same entry, it also says it lives in a pack, which means that it's not unique at all, and there's lots of them. Doesn't sound very legendary to me. Next is Zeraora, and while it's clearly designed to be likable, really leaning into that Lucario furry aspect, nothing about it really says legendary, even less so than Zarude in my opinion. Most of its Pokédex entries kind of just state that it's really fast, but I'm not so sure being fast is what makes you eligible for being legendary, especially when you get outsped by Electrode. Man, 150 in speed? Who made the rolling bomb so quick? But ultimately Zeraora falls flat because it doesn't really have anything to suggest it's legendary. It doesn't really have much lore, it's kinda strong, and it's kinda unique, but unique in the fact that there only seems to be one of them. Maybe. Meltan and its evolution Melmetal, again, really forget to fill out any sort of niche that carves them out as a unique Pokemon to make them legendary, or any sort of significance about them that would, well, put them above any other regular Pokemon. The little Meltans combining to become Melmetal is not a unique concept. Even as far back as Generation 1 we had Pokemon like that, with Magnemite turning into Magneton, and then later on we have things like Spiritomb and Beldum that come together to become Metang. It has a simple yet fun design, which complements its simple yet fun Pokédex entries, which is just that it was very strong, and it has lived for quite a long time. The only thing that I can see that it might suggest to be legendary is that it has the strongest punches of all Pokemon, which I highly doubt. Additionally, Meltan evolves into Melmetal, and while evolution is not a deal breaker, it doesn't necessarily help with trying to separate it from other Pokemon, most of which evolve. So instead of Meltan's evolution separating it from other legendary Pokemon, it more makes them better fit in with regular Pokemon. The Sea Drifter Pokemon Fione is, well, Fione. I'm not sure I have to really explain this one. I feel like everyone knows that this one isn't very legendary. The only really thing it has is that it's the offspring of Manaphy. That's it. That's literally all it has. It's not strong, it's not unique, as there's many of them. It's got no lore significance other than coming from an egg of Manaphy, but if you're calling that lore significance, you're really grasping at straws. Fione has access to the move Take Heart, I suppose, but that's definitely more of Manaphy's thing than Fione's. If Fione evolved back into Manaphy, then at least it would be somewhat interesting. But it doesn't, so it kinda doesn't really serve any purpose. So, as a result, it seems so flawed that you'd probably find one of these in a lost and found bin. At least it's kinda cute. The Swords of Justice, along with Keldeo, don't really need the title of Legendary. At the very least they speak in their movie, but I'm telling you that's all they have. Maybe you could say they're unique in that there's only one of each of them, but there's a couple roaming around not only Unova, but also the Crown Tundra in Galar. It's debatable whether you can count these as two separate instances of them, or just the same one who happen to be in two different locations. Either way, I don't think it's enough to make them legendary. You wouldn't really think twice if you saw a bunch of these clopping around. Did I just say clopping? The only lore significance they might have is that they fight for justice and they have vigilantes on the side of good and innocent Pokemon. But that's not exactly a unique trait. Where I really can throw them a bone is that in their film, one of the requirements for becoming a Sword of Justice is to defeat Kyurem in a fight, and that is no easy feat. However, I can't help but find it's a little rigged. Not only do all four of them have the fighting type, which is strong against ice, but also two of the four of them have an additional typing that is strong against ice, in Rock and Steel. To become Sword of Justice, you have to beat Kyurem. No, not Zekrom or Reshiram. No. They're just not as strong as Kyurem, so obviously we have to go for Kyurem, right? There's no other reason, right? And also, Keldeo doesn't even defeat Kyurem. They kind of just go like, oh, you did your best. You're a Sword of Justice now. Meloetta, the Melody Pokemon, is quite cute, and I was even going to put it higher than this, but after reading a bit more into it, it actually wasn't as much as I thought it was. Originally, I believed that not only did Meloetta inspire creation, but she was the very reason that humans had creativity at all. As if human imagination and Pokemon imagination wouldn't really exist without the existence of Meloetta. However, upon reading a bit further into her, I realized that that wasn't the case. Sure, she inspires people to be creative, to make art, song, whatever, but she's not imperative to the existence of creativity. So instead, she's more of an elusive Pokemon that inspires those to, well, be creative, but nothing much more than that. And so I could see her being a regular Pokemon. Maybe a rare one, but still a regular Pokemon. I just don't believe her ability to inspire people is quite unique enough to make her special. Carbink's older sister, Diancie, is, just kind of that. To me, this seems like another Vespid Queen situation, or at least it could be, where only the female Carbinks can evolve into Diancie. I mean, they're obviously meant to be similar. In Diancie's movie, she's amongst a bunch of Carbink, and their stat spread, as well as the fact that they're covered in diamonds. But hey, I guess you could say all the Carbink are her followers, and that kind of makes her legendary. Wait a minute. No, it doesn't. Kingdra, Nidoqueen, Vespiquen. If you couldn't tell already, the only reason I haven't left the Carbink point yet is because she doesn't really have much else. Her Pokédex just kind of states that she can create diamonds that are beautiful, which is fine, I guess, but it's not legendary. At the very least, she can stop a blast from your Yveltal, but that's it. And it also has to be in Omega form. Okidogi, Monkidori, and Kissingibity are the loyal three, and they are quite loyal to being shit. If you're wondering who I was most excited to put into the bottom tier, it's these guys. It's these guys. They are an absolute insult to the title of a legendary Pokemon. Their legendary attribute is getting their shit pushed in. Seriously, their whole thing is that some little purple baby, Pecharunt, puts a chain around their neck and says, "Oi, go steal me that guy's masks. I need it so some old people will like me more." Then, the loyal three proceed to get their shit pushed in by said masked individual, Ogerpon. After they're dead and gone, the villagers misinterpret everything and say, "Oh, the loyal three, they were trying to take down Ogerpon, who is evil." But that just wasn't the case. Which is fine for a misunderstanding, but it just means that they're bullies. They're legendary bullies. High school bullies. I hate these guys. And their stats kind of stink too. No wonder they lost the 1v3. I literally don't have anything else to say. They suck. I guess you could say they're shit. I think it's only fitting that we talk about the Loyal 3's ringleader, Pecharunt, next. Pecharunt, who is a ghost type for some reason? Wait, why? Anyway. Its whole thing is that it is a poison puppeteer. Its whole deal is that it gives Moochie to people for them to eat, which it spiked beforehand, and so when they eat it, it can puppeteer them and control their will, which is what it did to the Loyal 3 in order to try and get Ogerpon's masks. Controlling other Pokemon, and I guess people, is certainly not a legendary attribute, as many Pokemon can do this. I not only think that it should be a regular Pokemon, but I want it to be a regular Pokemon, and have a bunch of, I guess, sibling Pokemon. Here. Pecharunt is, I guess, a fake Pechaberry? How cool would it be to have a bunch of other Pokemon based on berries like Pecharunt? For them all to have different stats and types depending on what berry they come from. So have one that's like a citrus berry that has lots of HP and is a grass type, as well as an Aspear berry that is an ice type and maybe has high special attack. And a Aurorus berry that is a fire type that might have high attack stat. You get the point, right? There's such wasted potential to have Pecharunt just be on its own and not be in a group of split evolutions like Eevee. I think it would benefit a lot from that, and I think it'd be a really cool concept to have a bunch of berry-inspired Pokemon that have types based on those berries. So what I'm saying is that Pecharunt is kind of a cool Pokemon idea, but it's just a shame that it's a legendary Pokemon because it doesn't really deserve to be. Hailing from the Isle of Armor, the Wushu Pokemon Kubfu and Urshifu linger at the bottom of this list. Their presence in the competitive scene, no matter how fierce, does not save them here. Just like Meltan and Melmetal, Kubfu's ability to evolve into Urshifu doesn't exactly help its case as a legendary, purely because it doesn't have a whole lot to back up it being a legendary in the first place. One thing I can say about Cubfu to maybe pull it over the line is that its evolution method is quite unique. In order to evolve, it has to climb the Mortal Kombat ladder via the darkness or water, and depending on which one it chooses, or well, I guess you, the trainer, chooses, it will adopt either one of Urshifu's fighting styles when it evolves. The dex states for Cubfu that it trains hard to perfect all of its moves. But even Pokemon like Machop are training and learning fighting styles at a young age, so it doesn't really come off as legendary. And just like Cubfu, Urshifu also lacks any key identifying factors that would make it legendary. When it's Gigantamax, I guess people call it the embodiment of rage, but I'm sure that's because it gives everyone else rage when it punches through their protect. The dex also states that all it takes from this Pokemon is a glare to take the lives of those with evil in their hearts. Or so they say. You won't be taking this planet, Frieza! All it takes is a glare from Urshifu and you're finished! Or so they say. But even this tyrant-defying trait is only in its Gigantamax form. And other Gigantamax Pokemon also have such a zany, weird, and powerful abilities such as Urshifu. I mean, Gengar's mouth goes to a whole new dimension. What is it, Kirby? I also have good reason to believe that there's quite a few bears roaming around. Now we reach the final entry into the could be a regular Pokemon category, and this one will probably get me in trouble. Hoenn's beloved Eon duo, Latias and Latios, fall from grace to the could be a regular Pokemon tier. And just like everyone else in this category, they too lack what is needed to be a legendary. They don't really have a place in the lore or world that is, well, significant or concrete. They aren't actually that unique in that not only do the decks say that there's flocks of them, but it also says that it is highly intelligent and capable of understanding human speech, which I don't think that's a unique thing. Given, you know, trainers. Both Latias and Latios' information both kind of say the same thing, so I can't really pull from each to bring out some sort of better conclusion for them. Wow, that made it sound like I was gonna kill them. With the names being Latias and Latios, I always thought that the whole thing was that they represented the lines around the Earth longitude and latitude, which especially makes sense when you consider the fact that they fly around the planet very quickly. But in my reading, there wasn't really anything to suggest that this was true, so they're kind of just normal Pokemon. Their entries and their abilities are mostly regular. Probably the most special part about them is how elusive they are and how quickly they fly around the planet. Other than that, they're just more like powerful psychic dragon types, which doesn't really cut it for being a legendary Pokemon. With that being said, please no one throw a pitchfork at me, there's still so much more of the video to go. With that category over, we can finally move on to some Pokemon who are actually quite special. And my word choice is on purpose there, as we move on to the category dubbed, they are special, but not quite legendary. This category is for the Pokemon with a few special attributes, but not enough to quite make them legendary. While not being legendary, these Pokemon would still act as rare and strong Pokemon that only committed and skilled trainers would be able to attain. Excellent Pokemon that already fit this bubble are Pokemon like Hydreigon and Volcarona, as well as some gimmicky Pokemon such as Spiritomb or Ditto. Pokemon that are a touch above the rest, but not quite into the area of the divine. Ultimately, this is a grey area for Pokemon I couldn't really put as a regular Pokemon, but I couldn't also put it as a full-blown legendary, so they ended up here. So, let's just jump into this. Holding the fire-water dual typing, the steam Pokemon Volcanion holds a lot of the same problems as the others did. However, Volcanion had a couple attributes that made me second guess where I would put him. First and foremost, he has quite a level of power behind him. One with his Pokédex stating that he can blow away mountains with his steam, which is nothing short of impressive. And two with the large explosions he uses when making his own movie. And the second attribute that caught my attention was his ability to speak, a trait shared among a lot of legendary Pokemon. However, being significantly powerful and being able to speak aren't quite enough to make it a legendary in my book. However, with it only being one of its kind, and the attributes aforementioned, I would say it's at least special. Not a regular Pokemon, but neither legendary. Also, there is nothing legendary about that shiny. These next entries feel wrong. Saying that Generation 1's birds, Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres are not legendary feels really weird, as I guess they were the originals.
Oh yeah!
I mean, I've always referred to them as the legendary birds, but there isn't actually a huge legendary deal about them. Even more so than the swords, there seems to be multiple of them roaming around the different regions. Whether they're just the same Pokemon in different places at different times, or there's actually multiple of them, it does decrease their street cred that they have Galarian forms. The Pokédex never states any sort of world significance or lore significance, other than the fact that they are just legendary birds, which I guess implies that they have some sort of weight inside the world of Pokemon, or at least they have some sort of reputation among humans. This reputation they seem to have is one of the things that is bringing them up to the tier that they're in, instead of dropping them to a regular Pokemon, but I'll admit that this placement is a little flaky. At the very least, they seem to have masterful control over their respective elements. As Articuno flies through the air, causes snow to fall. When Zapdos appears from the clouds, it's said to drop enormous lightning bolts, which are both instances that show that the birds have massive control over their elements. But Moltres kind of has an interesting one, where it says that when Moltres appears, it indicates the coming of spring, which is a little out of place, but I guess it's something to support the fact that they're legendary. Ultimately, in the end, because they seem to have an exceptional level of power, combined with the reputation that they seem to have among humans and Pokemon, they can scrape their way into being special but not quite legendary. I'm sorry, bosses. Being from Generation 1 don't save you none.
Marshadow, the Gloom Dweller Pokemon. Gloom Dweller. Alright.
Is an adorable little fighting ghost that gets his abilities, his tricks, his skills, his powers from watching others, copying them, and doing them better. Oh, so he's kind of like Goku. To me, Marshadow is a special Pokemon because his ability of copying is quite unique. I mean, there's not really any others that do the same. Oh. Well, at least his way of copying is unique. Unfortunately, in-game, it doesn't really show this very well. In fact, Smeargle does it better. I really wish they would have leaned into this copying idea more in the games. I mean, his signature move Spectral Thief copies their stat changes, but that's it. I think they really could have gone harder into this. I don't think he should be given every move in the game, because from a gameplay perspective, that's just evil. Instead, I would give him a signature move that mimics the move that the opponent last used, but improves upon it. So let's say they used Thunder Punch. Now it's a Thunder Punch with 100 base power instead of 75. Well, let's just say they used Iron Defense. Instead of 2 to the defense stat, it's instead now 3 or 4. But in short, Marshadow special because ability unique and cool. Goku. Heatran, the only Fire Steel type in existence, pretty cool type, represents the Earth's hot boiling core. Maybe. From my research, it's kind of only a speculation that he represents the Earth core, and nothing concrete really says it. In fairness, stories tell of this Pokemon being birthed from boiling magma within Mount Coronet. And he does come from Generation 4, which is, I guess, the creation myth generation. So I can see the pieces of Heatran representing the Earth's core, but there really isn't much else here. Its lore is an, albeit educated, speculation. It looks like an awkward middle evolution, if you maybe shrink it down a little. It has a 50% chance to be either gender. What? I thought being genderless is how you get into the legendary club. Well, I guess I sliced my penis off for nothing. And are you seeing this? This random guy has a Heatran. Does some special character have a Heatran? No! It's just some random guy who doesn't even have a name. Heatran is only here because he might represent the Earth's core. I briefly mentioned them before in Fione's entry, but Manaphy is slightly better than Fione, but is still not legendary. I'm putting her in the special category because she's known as the Heart of the Sea. That's it. That's literally it. A title given to them by a movie, like once. Oh, but they have the wondrous power to bond with any Pokemon, so they're really charismatic. It's also quite elusive, so there's that. Being real, as I record this, I'm more and more thinking that Manaphy probably should have been in the tier below with Fione.
but at least I think it's a bit more unique than Fiona, so I think it scrapes by. I literally have nothing else to say about this Pokemon.
Alright, after Manaphy, let's cover a Pokemon who actually is really close to being legendary. Team Plasma's attempt to create the most powerful Pokemon ever, Genesect, just strays away from being legendary. Genesect was an apex predator years and years ago, and what gives him a leg up on other fossil Pokemon is his cybernetic enhancements that makes him even stronger. They gave a prehistoric bug an Iron Man suit and they went, yep, this is heat. And heat isn't the only thing he can do. He can shock, chill, and douse with his drives, which is quite unique. However, it only affects one move. Whoopsies. What really holds Genesect back though is that not only are there multiple of them, all of which get bodied by Mewtwo, it doesn't really hold a significant place in the world of Pokemon. It's just kinda there, off in the corner. I mean, it's cool. It's a cybernized version of a Pokemon we've never seen before, but it's just kinda held back and is just shy of being legendary. But hey, look at the way it flies around. It's so cute. The horses Glasturia and Specturia? Is that how you say their name? Probably not. Are quite interesting, as they're in the prestigious position that they are in because they are attached to a more prestigious Pokemon. Kind of like how Pichu gets special treatment because of Pikachu, or Nick Dacos because the media loves him. So in the same vein, the horses are here because of their connection to Calyrex, who rides them into battle or something like that. Either way, Calyrex tames these rampaging beasts to stop them from taking what they want by force. However, if causing trouble and stealing is a legendary trait, then I'm pretty sure any Esche on a train would be legendary. Hey, but in other news, Glasturia's Mask of Ice, covering its face, is 100 times harder than Diamond, so it's pretty bloody strong. And Spectruria can kick the soul out of you, literally. That's kinda neat. Though ultimately, it's their connection to Calyrex that puts them in this spot. Their interesting abilities and their aggressive nature don't really pull them up to being legendary, so their connection to Calyrex is the only thing that really makes them special. Following the horses, these next two Pokemon are similar because they reach their positions because of their links to other Pokemon. However, unlike the horses, Cosmog and Cosmoem evolve into their respective linked Pokemon. Now, of all the Pokemon we've covered so far, Cosmog and Cosmoem's designs definitely say legendary the most. Their colours definitely give them the feel that they represent the galaxy itself, or they belong somewhere out in the cosmos. I mean, either that, or it's what you see when you're tripping balls. Something interesting you can say about Cosmog is that they technically travel with you, the player, through Pokemon Sun and Moon, in Lily's bag. And over the course of the story, Cosmog evolves into Cosmoem, and then eventually their respective box art legendary. Because Cosmog and Cosmoem are so mysterious, and you don't directly use them or interact with them that much, it grants them a thick layer of uniqueness that might help you see them as legendary. However, the reason I'm not putting them higher is because without their counterparts, they don't really do anything. They learn Teleport and Splash, have terrible stats, and just kind of exist. No matter what, they're still unique, but because they've yet to fully evolve, they haven't quite reached their potential, and they haven't quite made it to legendary. Well, yeah, and this is a quote-unquote legendary Pokemon that I wouldn't mind there being lots of, because to me it makes sense. I mean, they fly around the cosmos, so it makes sense that there has to be one for each planet, or one for each sun or moon. Let's take a step back from cosmic entities and talk about Magearna. Ugh. Saying that is like trying to wrap your mouth around a sandwich that is just too big.
You are going to learn how to pronounce Magearna. Magearna. Magearna.
I'm just gonna call her Maggie. What makes Magearna so special is that she is completely artificial. Head to toe, in and out, she's completely mechanical.
Erecting a dispenser!
And even so, she lives. This is unlike Ditto, who might be artificial but gets its genetics from Mew. Or Golurk, who is a soul trapped in a body. Or even Genesect, while also mechanical, holds the skeleton of a long-lost apex predator lizard thing that has been brought to life by its mechanics. Hey, wait a minute! Through pure mechanics and seemingly a self-made soul, Magearna lives. Are you a legendary? As simple as it sounds, this uniqueness is just what puts Magearna here. It's really weird to put Magearna as a regular Pokemon because it's not. Ogerpon's masks are honestly fantastic. Not only do they change her types, but also her signature move and has an effect on terrestrialization. I wonder what the lore significance there is. Additionally, Ogerpon got an A+ in throwing hands! A quintessential part of her lore is that she just murders 3 Pokemon that try and take her masks from her. She puts them in the dirt so hard that everyone's just scared of her. Her masks and her ability to throw down the smoke definitely put her in this spot. But what prevents her from getting any higher is because, in terms of the world around her, she doesn't actually have any significance. What I mean by that is if she didn't clobber the Loyal 3, she wouldn't really have any lore. However, killing 3 Pokemon isn't actually that special. It's something, but it could be better. Next is the only 2 box art legendaries that don't make the cut of being legendary, at least in my list. They are the Paradox sandwich-powered bikes, Corvidon and Miraidon. And right out of the gates, I'm just gonna say it, they're Paradox versions of regular Pokemon. Cyclists are. The only reason they're here is because they're Paradox, because Paradoxes are special in nature. But, I mean, come on. I mean, are you really gonna tell me that Iron Bundle is a legendary? It's a Delibird with a cannon. Okay, look. At the very least, Corvidon or Miraidon travel with you throughout the game. Whether that makes them legendary is kind of up to interpretation, but to me, it at least gives them a bit of significance in terms of lore. Though, I do think that Cosmog and Cosmom did it better, the whole traveling with the player thing. Because they're more mysterious and you don't actually use them. They are unattainable until the end of the game, whereas Corvidon and Miraidon you use from the start. Maybe not in battle, but just around the place, which to me makes them seem less legendary. I mean, legendaries are meant to be powerful, menacing, elusive and all that. But something about using them as a bike throughout the entire game, from the start, makes them seem less special to me. But they're still here because they're Paradoxes.
Roger, roger.
Just like Genesect and the Pokemon following this entry, Type Null and Silvally are really close to being legendary. But I held back by a few things that just keep them down. Only by a little bit. To start off on Type Null and Silvally, I want to cover what makes them not legendary first. First of all, Sword and Shield confirms that there's multiple of them, and while this is okay and not a deal breaker, it never sits right with me that there's multiple legendary Pokemon without a good reason, and there being multiple Type Null because I guess people make more of them isn't quite good enough of a reason for me. Additionally, this Pokemon is artificial. You might have noticed that we've covered a few artificial Pokemon in this tier, and that's because I think this is a special trait for a Pokemon to have, but I don't think it makes them legendary. It doesn't seem right that people can just make a Pokemon and say, yep, this is legendary now. Like, it seems a bit, you know the meme of Obama awarding himself? It's that. As Mewtwo once said, the circumstances of one's birth
are irrelevant. It is what you do with the gift of life that determines who you are.
With that being said, let's see what Type Null and Silvally do have. They seem to be made in the image of Arceus with the RKS system as their ability. It allows them to change the type depending on what memory they have on. It also alters their signature move Multi-Attack to be that type. Along with this, Type Null and Silvally were created to defeat Ultra Beasts. Pretty sure they should have been built to stop someone else. While being designed to defeat Ultra Beasts is a pretty cool thing, in the story I don't think it actually does it that much. I could be mistaken, but I honestly remember the Tapus taking care of the Ultra Beasts, not Silvally. In the end, it's an arm wrestle to say whether Silvally should be a legendary Pokemon or not. On one hand, it was designed to take down dangerous Ultra Beasts in Arceus' image, but on the other, there's lots of them and it failed its task. So, what do we do? I'm putting it in not legendary, as the point of this video is to cut down on legendaries, but you're welcome to disagree. In fact, I'd probably understand. With Silvally and Type Null done, we reach the final entry to this category. And who is the last Pokemon to just miss out on the legendary title? Shaymin. Shaymin is an interesting case because I think Shaymin fails at what it's supposed to be, but it unintentionally succeeds in something else. To elaborate, Shaman is the gratitude Pokemon. Shaman's flowers, the ones on its body, and presumably the ones it creates, bloom when there is a sense of gratitude. So just like Meloetta, Shaman's whole thing, gratitude, it doesn't really bring it, it sort of inspires it or reacts to it. It's strongly tied to gratitude, but it doesn't necessarily conjure it. But at the end of the day, we can say that Shaman represents gratitude. That's fine. But the real meat is from, surprisingly, Shaman's power. It can dissolve toxins in the air and instantly transform a ruined land into a lush field of flowers. This is a level of plant-based power Crazy Dave could only dream of! I'm sure Pokemon like Venusaur and Eldegoss could do this over time, but this dex entry implies that it's really quick, which leans into the fact that Shaman has a lot of power behind it. But this is just restoring plants. Does this really make it legendary? I mean, there's no really other feats of power that it has that make it seem so— Did it just break a hole in the distortion world?! Okay, so it's got some pretty nifty abilities. So, TLDR, it's really powerful but not actually that much of a gratitude Pokemon, especially if you've seen the movie. For the most part, it's supposed to be the gratitude Pokemon, but doesn't do a very good job at it, so it gets drawn back from being legendary. But it's close. Oh yeah, it has a sky form too for some reason. With that category done, we can finally cross the line and figure out who actually deserves to be legendary. Spoiler alert, it's everyone who I haven't mentioned yet. So now it's not a question of if they're legendary, it's how legendary they are. As we have 3 more categories to go. With not much else to say, let's continue on. With the new tier, Passes. How inspiring of a name. The Passes tier is for Pokemon who just crossed the line into Legendary. They have enough of a status to become Legendary, but not enough to be any further. They sort of just meet the requirements, but aren't special among Legendaries. If that makes sense. These Pokemon have things to write home about for sure, but there's a few blank spots in their resume that prevent them from being draft pick number 1. I think I've explained my point. They pass the bar for being legendary. We begin this tier with a haunting reminder that we are not alone. The extraterrestrial DNA Pokemon Deoxys doubles as an intergalactic horror and a very mysterious psychic type. Deoxys is very unique for being able to change its form. It was doing it before it was cool, and its form changing is still unique to this day. Being able to change its stats without the use of a held item. Okay, little pet peeve here. You know what shits me? Why isn't Deoxys' normal form just flat stats across the board? It's just attack light, when it should be just neutral stats. Whatever. Its unique form changing, and combined with the fact that it's just still so mysterious, this Pokemon's origin is still one of the most mysterious out there. Now, other alien Pokemon exist that aren't legendary, but what gives Deoxys the edge is that it was bringing along with it an extinction level event in the big ass meteor that it was bringing with it that was going to wipe out everything. So yeah, that's pretty major. Oh, and if you're not convinced yet, it regularly clashes with this thing.
Trust me, we'll get to this bastard later.
Yeah, so I say it passes the bar for legendary. Moving from alien horrors to resurrected beasts, the legendary beasts are, to my surprise, superior to the birds. At least in terms of this list. I'd always seen these two trios as equals, so let's see what sets them apart. First of all, the beast's origin. After a certain tower got dumped in a KFC deep fryer, 3 unknown Pokemon perished in the flames. The tragedy brought a tear to the legendary phoenix Ho-Oh, who used its rainbow powers of rejuvenation to restore the deceased Pokemon. But the Pokemon did not return as they once were. They were given new life and new power. They became Suicune, Entei, and Raikou. This origin story is already way more than what the birds have, and as far as origin story goes amongst Pokemon, it's pretty up there. Now, with their resurrection and their new faces, they also acquired new powers. When Entei barks, or roars, volcanoes erupt. And these are at random too, so add 10 points to the destruction category. When Raikou roars, it sends shockwaves shuddering through the air, and they shake the ground as if lightning bolts had to come crashing down. Meanwhile, Suicune can instantly purify filthy, murky water. Here it is, the answer to the ocean's pollution. It's not Team C's, it's Suicune. Just get him to run a couple laps around the ocean. By the way, can I just say, Raikou feels like such an awkward middle child. I mean, Suicune got a game, and Entei got a movie, but Raikou didn't really get anything like that. Poor Raikou. So with their unique powers and origin story, I'm placing them in Legendary. Take that, Kanto. Now let's round off a bit more of Gen 2 with Celebi, the Onion Fairy Pokemon. Whoops. Celebi zips around the passage of time freely to its will. This unique ability easily places it in this tier, as transporting yourself through time is not an ability that really anyone has outside of you-know-who. Additionally, Celebi is quite elusive. It only appears in times of peace and avoids conflict. No wonder we haven't seen it recently. It bolsters grass and trees with its own strength, and it can heal wounds too. With these traits, you could say that Celebi is sort of a symbol of peace, but not only that, rest and calm potentially too. Imagine it, you're in a time of hardship, but then you see it, a glowing portal, and outside, Celebi appears. And with this, you know that your hardships are coming to an end, as the presence of Celebi secures the fact that peace is to come. But this is more of an interpretation, even though I think it would be more interesting if it acted as the time police, mending errors in the timeline whenever it needed to. Kinda like Dialga's assistant. The Courageous Quartet, the Guardians of Alola, the Tapus, are the next in the leagues of Legendary. No, not like that! Tapu Koko, Tapu Lele, Tapu Bulu, and Tapu Fini all protect their respective islands from threats, such as Ultra Beasts. And, I don't know, Twitter? There's gotta be a reason that they're all so happy here. Being guardian deities seems to be their entire purpose, which in a way cements them as a part of Alola itself. Now, while they don't have anything else to push them higher into the ranks of Legendary, they do have personality flaws that make them sort of like, almost like faulty guardians in a way. Not that they don't protect anyone, but they're not exactly all good and heroic like you might see in a stereotype. It adds an interesting amount of depth to them that lets you see them as characters as opposed to just animals, mythical beings. The character flaws in question go like this. Although it's called a guardian deity, if a person or Pokemon puts it in a bad mood, it will become malevolent. Although called a guardian deity, Tapu Lele is devoid of guilt about its cruel disposition and can be described as nature incarnate. Although it's called a guardian deity, it's violent enough to crush anyone it sees as an enemy. Also, it's a lazy Pokemon. Although called a guardian deity, terrible calamities sometimes befall those who recklessly approach Tapu Fini. Okay, that one's the most mysterious of all of them, but for that reason it's the most scary. Now, what does this mean in terms of their legendary status? Nothing. I just thought it was interesting, so I talked about it. I wish I had more to say about the Tapus in reference to this video, but I don't. They're deities, guardian deities embedded into the region of Alola. But other than that, I can't say any more. By nature, they are very prominent to the lore of Alola, which gets them to this spot, but there ain't much else here to talk about, so... Okay, but wouldn't it be cool if there was a 5th artificial Tapu for the Aether Foundation? Victini, the Victory Pokemon, has one of the most unique abilities I've ever seen. Victini can just bring victory. Like a writer bringing favoritism to their favorite character, it's like Victini has the plot on its side. But that's its ability. Obviously this can't work very well in games, as that would completely ruin all balance, but in lore it's supposedly the case. In the anime, we see Victini use its power on a Tepig, which uses said power to defeat a Hydreigon. That shit's no joke. Also, the deck states Victini's power as infinite. Makes you wonder if he needs to sleep. Also, did you know Victini's design is based on these little apple bunnies? Look at them, they're so cute. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna eat them. Does this mean Victini has like apples? Oh yeah, Victini has a signature move called V-Create. Fun fact, there's actually another legendary Pokemon who can use this. I almost don't have the heart to tell you who it is. Also, what is Game Freak's obsession with making these tiny mythical Pokemon psychic type? Calyrex the King Pokemon is the only Pokemon that works out at the library. Look at the size of that noggin. What are we measured in? Football fields? Calyrex has the ability to bring rich and bountiful harvests, along with lush greenery, to any area. And given that all of his stuff takes place in the Crown Tundra, it's safe to say he's pretty good at it. Calyrex's plant-raising abilities remind me a lot of Celebi, minus the time travel. While Calyrex might not have time travel, Calyrex did tame Glastria and Spectria. Still don't know if I'm saying that right. This puts Calyrex in the position of a leader and a protector.
I will keep you safe.
It's probably pretty easy for him. Everyone can just hide behind his big ass head. Calyrex's exceptional grass-based power and ability to tame even the most ferocious of beasts just pulls Calyrex into Legendary in my opinion. But I admit he's likely the lowest one in this tier. Next we have Unova's Forces of Nature, or the Genies as some call them. And for years, they've been blurring the line of what a Pokemon is. Muscular men in clouds. Yep, that's a Pokemon. Each of the Genies embody a different natural disaster. Tornadus embodies tornadoes. Thunderous embodies storms. And Landorus embodies earthquakes. Almost identical to when your mother falls over. The way the Genies embody their respective forces of nature really embeds them as part of the world of Pokemon. They also have Therian forms that are more animalistic. I'm more partial to them because they're not big burly men. Another interesting thing about them is that in Pokemon Legends Arceus, they each got a signature move, which is kinda strange since they already embody Hurricane, Thunder, and Earthquake respectively, but I suppose they aren't signature, so it's nice that they got these. Huh, I wonder if this group got anything else in Hisui. Ah! A woman! What is Enamorus supposed to be? What are you? What part of nature exactly do you represent? Is love in the air? Is that what you're supposed to be? The love-hate Pokemon? I don't understand. Why couldn't you have been water type and represent tsunamis? It would have made much more sense. Enamorus is ugly, unnecessary, and it was just tacked onto this trio as if they needed it. No! Get out of here! Okay, it might sound like I'm hating on Enamorus. That's because I am. It shouldn't exist. Why? Why was this added? It doesn't make sense to me. Maybe there's some real world relevance that I don't know about? And if there is, please enlighten me, because I do not understand Enamorus' existence. However, it is officially part of the forces of nature, so it gets into this tier by default. So Landorus and Calyrex Shadow, one after the other, huh? In the same tier. I don't know about you, but I'm sick of these monsters destroying the competitive scene. I hope there aren't any others in this tier. Oh hi Zacian! Oh, and Zazmazet. The hero doggos of Sword and Shield hold back the darkest day, also known as Eternatus. In terms of lore, Zacian and Zamazenta have it on lock. They are quite literally the Sword and Shield for Galar. Oh sorry, I meant Britain! Jolly good shite. Let's go lose the cricket then! Zacian and Zamazenta also have a unique ability, along with Eternatus, to be able to smite Dynamaxed Pokemon. Their signature moves, Behemoth Blade and Behemoth Bash, do double damage to Dynamaxed Pokemon. This is obviously linked to the fact that their whole thing is that they took down the Dynamaxed Pokemon. Additionally, within the Slumbering Weald lies their shrine, or whatever. Point is, this has clearly been aged and weathered due to time, and not only that, lots of people among the Galar region don't even know it exists, which gives it an element of a myth, lost to time, an ancient relic of the past, which I guess feeds into their elusiveness. What stops these two getting any higher is that, while they are essential to stopping the darkest day, supposedly, they are only a piece of the event. I mean, Eternatus carries most of it. An event, while major in the timeline, isn't something that's always around. I mean, it happens twice. So they are legendary heroes for sure, but they're certainly not deities or anything. Next we have the Treasures of Ruin, or the Calamity Pokemon, or the Ruinous Pokemon. Whatever way you call them, they consist of Wo-Chan, Shen-Tao, Ting-Lu, and Chi. I probably most definitely got those wrong. Bang ding ow.
These Pokemon are certainly among some of the most vague of the list, as just like Zacian and Zamazenta, their history and their information has mostly been lost and eroded to time.
The main crux of these Pokemon is that these Pokemon have been indirectly spawned by the tyranny of an evil king. Wo-Chen's tablets hold the grudge of a person who was punished for trying to call out an evil king's deeds. The sword embedded in Chen Pao holds the hatred of everyone who perished to it at the hands of their evil king. The bowl, or ancient vessel, atop Ting Lu's head, contains the fear of those under the evil king. You know, after a while, they stop being weird and they start sounding really stupid.
Oh, I've got a bowl in my head and it contains everyone's fear.
That's dumb. And finally, envy accumulated within the curved beads that make Chi-Yu. So as we can see, these Pokemon are made from grudges, hatred, fear, and envy. These Pokemon are living constructs of these things, which certainly gives them a much needed amount of spice. But another thing that gives this quartet a level up is the way you obtain them. I haven't yet really talked about how you obtain your new one yet, because no one has really jumped out at me as much as these four have yet. Like sure, the Tapu temples are pretty cool, and your favorite color would have to be grey if you thought that flying on the giant draconic Lord of the Skies into space to destroy a meteor to fight an alien which came from the edge of the galaxy wasn't cool. But you really have to go out of your way to get the ruinous Pokemon. You have to go hunting around the Paldea region, that's enough on its own, for 16 different stakes, 4 for each member of the quartet. Apparently I was drinking down stupid juice before I said that, because it's not 16 of them, it's 32, and each of them have 8. Sorry.
The stakes really make you ask, why are they there, how are they there, and how the hell do they work? You press them and it sends some, Wi-Fi signal to the big shrine down there? Okay. Didn't realize they had Bluetooth 200 years ago, but here we are. Yeah, I don't know, the quartet just kind of hit the nail on the head when it comes to just mysteriousness, being unique in both origin and game, and seem to have some more depth to their lore that I'd love to see more of.
The next duo is technically unofficial, because one is a legendary and one is a mythical. However, they are of dreams and nightmares, so they kind of go hand in hand. Cresselia and Darkrai certainly pass for being legendary. They embody nightmares and dreams, bringing them about whenever they're near. Additionally, Cresselia has very strong ties to the Crescent Moon. Someone's going to be pressing copyright charges. I also like the fact that Cresselia's design is very bizarre. Circular wings that seem to just jut out the sides of its body. It hovers with no real way of doing so. Kind of like something you'd find out of a dream, which makes sense as it is the dream Pokemon. Meanwhile, Darkrai is obviously the opposite. As it embodies nightmares, it really leans into that terrifying design. Blood red along with black, a smoky-like body that looks like it's gonna choke you, along with those eerily long legs, what the hell? But supposedly, it means no harm, which I highly doubt because of Mystery Dungeon. Okay, but how did Darkrai mess with Dialga so hard? I really would play Explorers of Sky, but I can't do that because I have to play a Hat in Time for the 9th time. Ultimately, this is a very simple placing, as they embody their respective things, dreams and nightmares, while also being elusive and having unique abilities. So, not much else to say. Also, to be clear, Cresselia is just nighttime sleepy dreams, not dreams of what you want for the future and ideals. That's another guy.
In Pokemon Sword and Shield's DLC, the Crown Tundra, this group of legendary Pokemon received 2 new Goobers, which makes this legendary group the largest of all of them. They are the Reggies. Whether you call them the Golems, the Titans, the Giants, or shit, they hold a special place in my heart for really feeling legendary. Like, they're so simple yet alien. They are seemingly simple constructs of matter that go in some language we'll never be able to understand. Regirock, Regice, or was it Regice? Registeel,
And the two newer ones, Regieleki and Regidrago. Now, I think there's an obvious place to start with these guys. It's how you obtain them. They might be my favorite way to obtain any legendary Pokemon in any game. Up there with Deoxys and Arceus, Dialga, and Palkia in PLA. Some might call them tedious, and I get that, but shouldn't legendary Pokemon, who are akin to gods in this universe, be challenging to get? Instead of just, here you go. Okay. But how funny was it that Game Freak looked at its child audience and said, go learn Braille, dickhead, to get these Reggies. It's cruel, but objectively funny. Just like killing blissfully unaware snipers with a frying pan, or taking a poo on your neighbor's lawn, and blaming on the dog that they don't have. Where were we? Oh right, the Reggies. Yeah, so did you know that these guys are like, immortal? They've been around for years and years, like centuries, and also 3 of the 5 of them can either regenerate themselves or are just indestructible. Oh yeah, and those bands on Regieleki, they hold back its power. So just in case you were thinking that they weren't powerful, which I could understand looking at them in the competitive scene. In fact, all of them were locked away in ancient times because people were scared of their power. I would be too if this Pokédex entry of Regicharizard is true. Alright. But now I want to delve into something that is unconfirmed and was mostly a fan theory, but judging by how Game Freak has gone about things, I think they're leaning into it too. And that is, each of the Reggies represent a different time period. Reg Ice represents the Ice Age, Regi Rock represents the Stone Age, Regi Steel represents the Iron Age, or maybe the Industrial Revolution, Regidrago represents the Middle Ages, and Regieleki represents the modern day. I love this theory a lot, and as I said, I'm pretty sure it's true at this point, as Regidrago and Eleki really fit this, but maybe I'm coping. Either way, this theory does open the door for even more Reggies, believe it or not. Now, I know people wouldn't be a fan of having more Reggies, and I can see that, but imagine having a Reggie for the far future, or maybe even one from before time started. Yeah, okay, I'm reaching a bit far. Now, the fact that this hasn't actually been confirmed is actually what is keeping them from being a tier above, as since it's not confirmed, it feels a little too jumpy to put them up there. But they're close, they're very close. I mean, immortal, ancient, indestructible, powerful, hard to obtain, unique to obtain, and then this potential theory, come on. Oh, and the icing on the cake, Reggie means king, so King of Ice, King of Rock, King of Steel, King of Dragons, and King of Electricity. Amazing. Hey look, it's Regidark. Okay, but wouldn't it be funny if there was a ghost-type Reggie called Regicide? The Wishmaker Jirachi combines the mysteriousness of Deoxys, but the unique powers of Celebi and Victini. Unsurprisingly, Jirachi grants wishes! Wow, who could have guessed that one? From the Pokemon called the Wishmaker. Wait, you're telling me we have 5 legendary genies, and the one who makes wishes is the little baby with a star on its head? That checks out. Additionally, Jirachi lives the dream of any engineering student. Sleeping for 1,000 years. Okay, can we take a step back for a second and talk about this? This isn't just some random fold on its body. No, this is an eye! What makes it more bizarre is that none of its dex entries mention anything about it. It's just there. I thought that maybe it had something to do with its signature move, Doom Desire. But no! It's just there! It's creepy! But yeah, Jirachi has a very unique and powerful ability, and it is quite elusive because it sleeps all the time. And now it's finally time to round off the tier with the Guardian of the Sea, Lugia. Of the many entries of this list, Lugia had to be one of the most difficult ones to place, as all of Lugia's claims to fame are all weirdly contentious. Alright, I'll tell you what I mean. Lugia is the Guardian of the Sea, or so they say. But we don't get a whole lot of evidence about this. Instead, it hides at the bottom of the sea, as being above the ocean would cause too much destruction, as its power is too much. And its other thing is the relation to the birds. When the trio goes on a rampage, it's usually Lugia that's the one to quell their madness. And while this would be a good thing, unfortunately I happen to have discussed why the birds aren't exactly legendary in the previous part to this video. Yikes. But I'm willing to put it here, as the whole Guardian of the Sea thing would be nice to have some evidence to show what it really means. I think it's still worthy of notice. And taking down the birds, even if they aren't legendary, they are very strong, so all three of them together, it's quite a feat to be able to bring them down. Also, it having the intelligence and empathy to hide at the bottom of the sea to protect others since it is so strong, does give it a good level of uniqueness, character, and elusiveness. Oh, and I'm not sure where Shadow Lugia fits into all this, but it's the only one to have a unique shadow form. You don't count, you're different. So, there's that. With that entry done, we are finally able to reach the top of the mountain. The summit. True legendaries. These Pokemon are titans among the rest. Gigantic in presence, and could be considered royalty. They not only check the boxes for criteria, but surpass them. These Pokemon are either linked to fundamental parts of the world, or have changed the world themselves. Or their presence is enough to catch the attention of the divine. Even more simply, they can be considered deities. Now, I can keep listing attributes about this category, but you want to know who's in this tier. So let's get to it then. It's finally time to talk about the most iconic legendary. Created in a lab by scientists to be the ultimate fighter, gifted with the ability to teleport, move at incredible speeds, and blast away its opponents with its incredible strength. Its youth tarnished by the traumatic loss of a loved one. It is, of course, none other than Shadow the Hedgehog. Oh, sorry, I meant Mewtwo. Mewtwo, other than being my Smash main, is the artificial Pokemon. To address this, there's a couple of things that put Mewtwo far above its counterparts. The most important one is that it is a direct clone of Mew. This is substantial because Mew is the origin of all Pokemon, at least on Earth. So that's pretty special. But on top of this, Mewtwo has a level of power that the others don't really come close to. Hell, it even has 2 Mega Evolutions. The similarities don't seem to end. With this alone, I might have put it in the passes tier, but what puts Mewtwo over the edge is just the fact that Mewtwo is everywhere. Mewtwo fought Mew, Mewtwo fought Genesect, times 5. Mega Mewtwo is the ace of Team Rainbow Rocket. It became Shadow Mewtwo in Pokémon Tournament. Buddy is the MC of a shonen anime. So to put this simply,
We dreamed of creating the world's strongest Pokémon. And we succeeded.
the Rainbow Phoenix Ho-Oh, just like the Phoenix of Myth, represents rejuvenation and rebirth. It truly showed its rainbow-colored power when it rebirthed 3 unknown Pokemon into the legendary beasts. This is actually big for Ho-Oh. Its power was so potent that it was able to gift 3 dead Pokemon with enough power to be considered legendary. Oh, and bring them back from the dead. And to this day, the beasts are still elusive and praised demigod-like entities. And Ho-Oh just created them. Makes you wonder why it doesn't do it more though. Ho-Oh also promises eternal happiness to whoever sees it. And given the fact that it only reveals itself to pure-hearted trainers, shows that not only is it quite elusive, it's also very intelligent. Able to look into the heart and soul of a being and judge whether it is worthy of its blessing. Heart and soul, oh my god. But the fact that this Pokemon created 3 legendary Pokemon and can manipulate fate in the favor of whomever it chooses. And that's eternal too, so that shit don't go away. Man, Ho-Oh could save so many lives by just existing. Oh, and bring them back, of course. Okay, so hear me out. You know what would be funny? If we make a Pokemon game called Pokemon Black, where the mascot legendary is white, and at the same time, make a Pokemon game called Pokemon White, where the mascot legendary is black. That'd be really funny. The Dao or Tao trio, however we pronounce it, consists of Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem. Reshiram is the Pokemon of truth. It embodies truth. It sees truth as infinitely more important than ideals and dreams. It is the yang to Zekrom's yin. Zekrom is the Pokemon of ideals and dreams. Just like Reshiram, it embodies dreams and sees it as much more important than the truth, believing in ideals as an ultimate goal. The yin to Reshiram's yang. These intertwined, region-destroying Pokemon of fire and electricity are parts of the mysterious and lost original dragon. This is a Pokemon we've never seen before. And given that this original dragon was made up of what we now know as 3 legendary Pokemon, we can assume that it was very strong, potentially representing the entire spectrum of yin and yang. Now, we can catch a closer glimpse of this original dragon when we take a look at the trio's cold third counterpart. Kyurem is a cold representation of what you have when you have lost touch with the truth and let go of your ideals. It eats people, by the way. I thought I'd slip that in there. Where Reshiram and Zekrom took the truth and ideals from the original dragon, there was nothing left for Kyurem to have, and Kyurem is merely the residue of what remained. The nothingness. Does it sound like I've had a tonal shift here to sound more bleak? Well, it's kind of fitting, right? Because that's Kyurem. Kyurem is really bleak. Bleak not in a bad way, by the way, more of just a miserable reality thing. Also, Kyurem is unique as it is able to fuse with either Zekrom or Reshiram. Now, you could technically say that other Pokemon can fuse, but not in the same way that Kyurem can, as this actually is a gameplay mechanic, and not a form of evolution. And so, Kyurem Black and Kyurem White are the closest we'll ever get to the original dragon. So yeah, region-destroying power, representing pieces of reality in truth and ideals, their origin consisting of an overwhelmingly powerful and mysterious dragon, representing one of the most known symbols in our world. Yeah, I'd say they're pretty legendary. It's just a shame we haven't seen the original dragon. I think we need that Unova Legends game. Speaking of Legends games, however, with Pokemon Legends ZA on the horizon, we can only guess that Zygarde is probably going to get a lot of love. Zygarde is known as the Order Pokemon, but as for why that is, we have to take a look at its connection to Xerneas and Yveltal. Commonly known as the Aura Trio due to their similar abilities, Zygarde seems like it doesn't fit in with the whole life and death fiasco going on with Xerneas and Yveltal. However, when you look a bit closer, it makes sense. Life and death are often seen as opposites. However, in the right circumstances, they often work together, such as in an ecosystem. In an ecosystem, things die to make way for the living, and the living feed off of the dead, or something like that. Point is, there is a defender of the ecosystem in the world of Pokemon, and that is of course Zygarde. Zygarde literally defends life and death, which is probably why Zygarde struggles to hurt Xerneas and Yveltal with their typings. Well, that is unless it's in its complete form, apparently. Oh yeah, Zygarde is made out of lots of little cells, like different organisms making up an ecosystem. And depending on how many cells it has, it can either be a doggy, a snake, or something from Pacific Rim. Regigigas is known as the Colossal Pokemon, and despite that, it's smaller than a lamppost. While its stature might be underwhelming, its history is not. It quite literally pulled the continents into place. You'd think with strength like that it'd be more formidable in battle, but unfortunately, Regigigas isn't a morning person. Additionally, Regigigas created some of the Regis in its image. The reason I say some is because I have my doubts that Regigigas created Regidrago and Regieleki. This is because on Regigigas' body, we see 6 circles that represent Regirock, Ice, and Steel, but nothing for Eleki and Drago. Now, there is an answer that could say, oh, but Regigigas came before those two, so Game Freak didn't know. Well, yeah, that's an answer, but it's also a lame one. You see, it doesn't make sense to me that Regigigas would have made Drago and Eleki. This is because Rock, Ice, and Steel are something that you can physically touch, move, and make something out of, which goes along with Regigigas' physical and bulky stats and stature and design. However, you cannot just pick up electricity or dragon energy, whatever that means. So, I have a theory. I think out there somewhere is a counterpart to Regigigas, one that is more specially orientated, one that could touch electricity and whatever the hell dragon energy is, and would be able to make Regieleki and Regidrago. But hey, that's just my Matthew Patrick game theory. It's nothing concrete. It's probably not real. I don't know. It's more interesting than the alternative. The mischievous Pokemon Hoopa fits into the same category as Celebi, Jirachi, and Victini in that it's a little mythical with a very unique ability. Oh, and guess what type it is? But Hoopa gets a leg up on the other one, as its ability is much more substantial than the other ones, at least in my eyes. The golden hoops around Hoopa's body are the source of its power. I think these two would get along. These golden hoops turn into portals that can transport anything to anywhere. This includes inanimate objects, people, Pokemon, hell, even legendary Pokemon. And then when this Prism Ball says it's Bottomland time, Hoopa becomes Hoopa Unbound, and becomes even stronger, able to transport castles and even control legendary Pokemon. These hoops can also transport between alternate timelines, so it's able to rupture time and space. Yikes. You'd think Dialga and Palkia would do something about that, but no, they do the opposite. Oh yeah, Hoopa likes donuts apparently. So, you want to see what Cosmog and Cosmom turn into? The Lion of the Sun and the Bat of the Moon. They are ambassadors of the Sun and Moon respectively. And despite this, Solgaleo is a Steel type. For some reason. Like, why isn't it Fire? Also, for anyone hoping for a Light type, this was the nail in the coffin. This is literally the Light Trio. And yet, the Light type was not added for them, and instead they got Psychic. Anyway, confusing types aside, what keeps them from getting into the Legendary among Legendaries tier is that they didn't necessarily create the Sun and Moon, they simply embody it. And while this on its own is big points for them, it doesn't quite make them supreme. However, they are among a small group of Pokemon that can rip holes into Ultra Space, traveling light years, or so it says, and being able to access alien dimensions, such as Ultra Space Wilds, Ultra Beast Dimensions, and Ultra Megalopolis. I also love that Solgaleo is meant to be like the lion that ate the sun. And Lunala, well, I think these two would get along. Anyway, so there isn't much else to be said. The two can create ultra wormholes that can travel between dimensions and across our own reality, light years in fact. As well as the obvious, they represent the sun and the moon. So, they're pretty legendary in my eyes.
We finally have someone to blame for the ugliest gimmick in a Pokemon game. The rainbow turtle thing, Terrapogos. Terrapogos? Am I just really bad at speaking, or are these names actually quite difficult to pronounce? Terraturtle here is the source of the terrestrialization phenomenon. This alone gets it into the legendary tier, and it is easily the most noteworthy thing about it. Additionally, it is quite unique in that when it does terrestrialize, it does have some unique effects, in that its stats just change. It gets 100 points added to its base stat total. Maybe that was our hint that Megas were coming back. However, those improved stats doesn't save it from being quite overdone. Its normal and terrestrial form look fine, but its stellar form looks like it's just equipped way too many cosmetics. But let's continue the trend of region gimmicks. The power of Dynamax was brought to the region of Galar by the gigantic Eternatus. Move over, Wailord. Your spot as the biggest Pokemon has been taken, though I'd argue it should have been taken a while ago. The first ever Poison-type legendary brought about the Darkest Day. Wait, what? Why isn't it a Dark type then? Whatever. Eternatus' power was so potent that it empowered all of Galar with Dynamax energy, allowing other Pokemon to grow to gargantuan size. Some Pokemon are even able to take new forms,
in the form of Gigantamax, all because of Eternatus. Eternatus also brought about the stupidest villain I've ever seen, but we don't talk about that. Eternatus also has specially made ops that were created just to stop it. A Sword and Shield of Galar to hold back the Darkest Day. So powerful, it needed 2 legendary Pokemon to take it down. And its power was so thick that it changed the course of an entire region. All the gyms and stadiums and all that are all built around pockets of Dynamax energy so that the Pokemon in the gym challenge can Dynamax. And that is all Eternatus is doing. Eternatus is a true legendary Pokemon and embodies the calamity that is the Darkest Day. But do you want to know what's even scarier than the dark? The light! The one who consumes all light is a true legend. Above even the true legendaries are the ones known as legendary among legendaries. They ascend beyond the summit of the mountain and breach the clouds above. They not only stand above the rest, they are fundamentals to our reality, to our world. They are nothing short of gods, fundamental to the way we see the world as it is. Each of them bringing great change to the world, and if they were to be removed, the world would never be the same. These Pokemon check all the boxes. They are important to the world, the lore, they are unique, they are powerful, they are elusive, they are special. Even among legendaries. These are the titans of the Pokemon universe. And to start off our tier, we have the one that stands out from the rest of them. You see, most of the Pokemon in this tier are forces of creation, or fundamentals to our world. However, the blinding one is not a force of nature like in the ways the others are, but instead the truest Pokemon antagonist, Necrozma. One of the reasons that the Prism Pokemon is so high up is that, unlike Eternatus and its Darkest Day, Necrozma's apocalyptic pursuit for light was not stopped, at least in other dimensions. We see in Ultra Megalopolis that all the light has been consumed, and Necrozma and its tower are the only sources of light. Now, whether this is a whole nother universe or dimension really doesn't matter, because it has consumed so much light around it that no other light is visible. No stars, nothing like that. Only Necrozma and the tower. It absorbed all of those stars, all of that light. It sealed that dimension's fate, and we don't know how many other dimensions it has plundered for light. Necrozma also siphons the power from Solgaleo and Lunala, as well as any other light source. Necrozma represents light itself, but also darkness, as in its wake, that is all that it's left. However, Necrozma didn't want to stop at one calamity, being absorbing all the light in the world. It wanted to double up, and so it summoned all the Ultra Beasts. Because of this, it kinda got seen as the master of the Ultra Beasts, and was almost mistaken as one itself. Necrozma's Z Crystal is also significant, as Ultra Necrozmium Z is the only one that makes the player stagger when its Z-move is used. The Z-move being a nuclear bomb called
The light that burns the sky!
Originally, the original Japanese version is known as
Heaven scorching light of
hey, look at this truck. Wouldn't it be straight up wacky if the origin of all Pokemon was under this truck? Oh my god. Mew, the new species Pokemon, was the origin of most Pokemon. Obviously excluding Pokemon that were obviously made by other beings, and potentially the Ultra Beasts and other extraterrestrial Pokemon. But other than all that, Mew evolved into every single Pokemon we know today, completely changing the world as we know it. Long ago, in the earliest eras of Earth, millions of Mews transformed depending on their environment. The sea-dwelling Mews turned into aquatic Pokemon, the ones in deserts turned into ground and rock types, yada 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 yada, jungles, the sky, tundras, savannas, any environment you can think of, the Mews evolved into and transformed into the Pokemon we know today. Potentially, even some legendary Pokemon. This gave Earth entirely new ecosystems, and entirely new life. Xerneas and Yveltal are the Pokemon of life and death. They create the crucial balance of life and death of the entire Earth's ecosystem. Neither is good or evil. They are simply both necessary parts of reality. And more remarkably, they somehow both pull off being designed after an X and Y respectively. Like, that sounds like such a goofy concept, yet they both rock it. Also, alarmingly, I think that these two are gonna get Megas in Legends EA, so let's have fun with Geomancy Mega Xerneas. That's gonna be fun. While focusing on Xerneas, I like that it seems to resemble Yggdrasil, the Norse tree of life. The tree that bonds all 9 Norse realms together. Even in Xerneas' dormant form, it looks like a tree. Well, it is a tree. Meanwhile, Yveltal, these two will probably get it. But something more relevant is the fact that when Yveltal's life comes to an end, it absorbs all life in the world. Though it is weird to think about that the embodiment of death could die, or has a lifespan, but in the end, they are of course the embodiments of life and death. There's not much else more you need to say to convince someone that these two are legendary among legendaries. There are tiers in order to separate strong and weak Pokemon so that they can all be used fairly and equally. The Uber tier is supposed to be the highest of all of them, meant for Pokemon so powerful they are restricted from all other play. So wouldn't it be funny if a Pokemon was banned from that tier for being so powerful? Hello Mega Rayquaza, Kyogre, Groudon, and Rayquaza make up the Weather Trio. The almighty Hoenn deities are essential to the world of Pokemon. Remember how Tornadus, Thundurus, and Landorus have their signature sort of gimmicks? Where do you think they got their playground equipment? These guys. Because these giants are not only capable of shifting the weather, they are also responsible for crafting the sea, land, and sky. So to be more specific, Kyogre, the true alpha generalist, widened the seas with its infinite downpour of rain is able to produce. It's able to increase the sea level without global warming. However, global warming is child's play for Groudon, the continent Pokemon. Groudon would be drinking buddies with Godzilla if it didn't vaporize all liquid around it with its intense heat. Additionally, it expanded and sculpted the continents so that those who couldn't swim had somewhere to live. And the third, emerald-colored part of the trio, Rayquaza, was responsible for making the atmosphere breathable and livable for organisms, while also keeping the weather balanced. However, Rayquaza doesn't only restore balance in the weather, but also to Groudon and Kyogre's clashes. Groudon and Kyogre seem to have hatred for each other ingrained into them, so whenever they meet, the world suffers. Their battles can create untold amount of calamity, damage and destruction if left unchecked. And the only one able to put their fighting to rest is Rayquaza. However, it hardly takes both of them to clash to cause calamity. Just one of the kaijus going primal can lead so much destruction if left untamed. So that makes you ask the question, what were Team Aqua and Magma thinking? I know what you're thinking. Hey, strange yellow guy. How did we go from titanic creatures responsible for all life on Earth to 3 psychic goobers that are not even half a meter tall? And my answer to that is... beats me. However, the fact that they are this high is actually no surprise, as they are direct creations of the one above all. Just like the creation trio. Uxie, the being of knowledge. Mesprit, the being of emotion. And Azelf, the being of willpower. Before this trio entered our worlds, people, and maybe even Pokemon too, were lacking of ideas, thoughts, and ability to solve problems. Blank slates, void of any emotion, or even feeling, and lacked the determination to do anything if it posed any sort of challenge. However, these 3 brought the gifts of knowledge, emotion, and willpower to the world. However, sometimes I don't think emotion is a gift. I dropped my toast. The Lake Trio not only gave their respective attributes out, but are also gods of them. Uxie contains all the knowledge there ever is. Mesprit can feel the emotion of any being. And Azelf would easily be the strongest Green Lantern. They can also manipulate those attributes in other beings too. Azelf can just rip the willpower away from someone, leaving them immobile and not willing to do anything at all. Or Uxie can just erase all your memories and all your knowledge. Bye bye. Yikes. And Mesprit... Additionally, these 3 seem to have the ability to calm down Dialga or Palkia if they are ever to go into a frenzy. Say some idiot slaps them with a red chain and they go out of control. Good job, Cyrus. If you wanted to destroy the world that much, you should have gone into politics. The Lake Trio also seem to have an unspoken bond with Giratina. I'm not so sure what it is, but they seem to follow you around in the Distortion realm in Pokemon Platinum. It's no surprise that these are above legendary, as they are the ones that brought us sentience. I love being sentient. Time. Space. Antimatter. These are all under the power of the almighty creation tree. Dialga, Palkia, Giratina. The almighty gods first found in the Sinnoh region are, like the Lake Trio, direct descendants of the original one. All it takes is either Dialga or Palkia to recreate the entire universe, as seen in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. And since Giratina is equal to them, we can say that she could do the same. Look, I don't think it was any surprise to anyone that the creation trio are this high. I think this is probably what everyone first guessed would be in the top tier. Alright, so Dialga, who went primal before it was cool, completely controls the flow of time. When it was born, time began moving. Time flows when Dialga's heart beats. Additionally, Dialga represents the first state of matter, solid, which is represented by its steel type. That's why Palkia is a water type, because it represents the state of matter, liquid. It has total control over the boundaries of space. It is said that space becomes more stable with Palkia's every breath. And thirdly, Giratina is the devil of the Pokemon universe, for lack of a better term, as it resides in its very own and very terrifying Distortion world, banished there for being too violent. Giratina likely represents antimatter or gravity, but also the third state of matter, gas, as it is a ghost type, and completes the trio. I'm not sure I have to justify anymore why the gods of space, time, and whatever Giratina is, should be here. It's pretty self-explanatory. But I must talk about their origin forms. As it came long before the other two, let's start with Giratina's origin form. As Giratina is resentful towards its creator for banishing it to an alternate realm, it changes its appearance to look less like its creator, removing its legs, levitating off the ground, sharp, elongated tendrils coming out of its back, and a long serpentine-like body. Yep, that checks out. Meanwhile, Dialga and Palkia try to look more like Arceus, as they desire their creator's power. And as a result, they look slightly deformed to the human eye, and I guess, for lack of a better term, biblically accurate. Abstract designs fitting to beings that are supposed to be above our reality. So far above, in fact, that the Pokemon we see are likely mere avatars of the true Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina. These guys traverse the entire universe, hell, maybe even multiverse, so why the hell would they stick around Earth so much, if it's not just an avatar? So yeah, these three are legendary among legendary. In fact, they're at the top of the legendary among legendary list, as, well, we're done. You see, the legendary among legendary category is finished. But there is one more entity we must talk about. The original one. The Alpha Pokémon. The one above all. The creator deity. God. Arceus. How can we truly understand Arceus? A being not unlike you, the player, who sees the world similar to you. A game. A universe that is one of many. But is Arceus aware the same way you are? How can we know? So many secrets lie within Arceus. Its form that we see, not its true face, but yet still not giving away any information. Expressionless. Impossible to grasp what it's thinking. But it is the creator of this multiverse, so would we be able to comprehend its true form? As the Arceus we see is only a small piece of the true Arceus. That is why you can capture an Arceus. It lets you. It allows you to take one of its many arms through the journey with you. A luxury, a shining achievement that you have conquered. Whatever Pokemon game that you are playing, whatever world Arceus has created for you. Each of these worlds, all created by Arceus. So let me ask you something. Every time you've captured Arceus, every time you've defeated Arceus, every time you may have bested Arceus, do you really think you could have done it if it didn't want you to? If it didn't let you? Because from all creations, over all creations, does the original one watch over all. The original one is in all things. The original one is nowhere at all. The original one breathed alone before the universe came. So let me ask you something. Can something so powerful, something omnipotent, so beyond all other things, be considered a Pokemon? A person? An entity? Or is it something far out of our comprehension? Arceus is not a legendary among legendaries. Arceus is beyond all Pokemon. The reality of Pokemon is forever grateful for the benevolence of Arceus. Also, Arceus in the Jewel of Life's portrayal of Arceus sucked. He was such a whiny bitch in that one. And there we have it. That's every legendary Pokemon, ranked from not legendary at all to very legendary. For you, that was a short 90 to 100 minutes, but for me that was 2 months, so we've both had our own journeys with this. Jokes aside, this was fun, though I probably won't be doing something as long as this again without proper motivation. If you made it all the way to the end, then I thank you, because we're in 2025. The average attention span is much shorter than it once was. So, for anyone interested, and if you've made it this far, chances are you probably are, here's the tier list. Here's the visual representation of every legendary Pokemon and how legendary I think they are. You are welcome to disagree with any of this. In fact, please do, I would love to hear your thoughts. And for some of these, I would not be surprised that you disagree with. Even within the tiers though, some Pokemon are a bit further away from others, so here's one that's a bit more interesting. Here you can see a plus and a minus and a middle section for each tier that shows the differences, I guess. I'm sure you understand it by looking at it. Left and higher means more legendary, to the right and lower means less legendary. If you haven't sniffed it out already, I really like legendary Pokemon. They're one of my favorite parts about Pokemon as a franchise. Because legendary Pokemon are special in nature, that usually means they have a bit more information and story to go along with them, and to me that makes them a bit more interesting than a lot of standard Pokemon. That's not to say regular Pokemon aren't interesting at all, that's not the case. I just think that a Regigigas is going to be inherently more interesting than a Tyrantrum. Also, I mean, they're just cool. Are you really gonna tell me that the Kaiju who created the continents and battles with other ancient deities isn't awesome? I've toyed with this concept before, what legendaries are more legendaries than others. I mean, I've always thought that some of them aren't really deserving of the title. I mean, from the start, I always thought that the Swords of Justice were a bit weak sauce. Not bad, but like, not legendary. And don't get me started on these guys. But like I said, I've toyed with this concept before, but I hadn't put quite as much thought on it as I did for this video. And as a result, I actually have some new appreciation for some of these legendaries, such as Zygarde, Ho-Oh, and Kyurem. Even the ones I wasn't much of a fan of, like the Ruinous Pokemon, who I now appreciate a bit. Also, I'm still questioning what the hell is going on with Jirachi's hidden eye. Oh yeah, how many legendary Pokemon are there now? Well, we started with 94, not 95, because I counted it and, well, it's not actually 95. But we have gone from 94 to 56. Is this still too much? Maybe? But when you remember that there are 1,000 Pokemon, that ratio actually isn't that bad. Also, a lot of them are in groups. Like, look at the passes tier. Of the 30 Pokemon that's in there, 6 of them aren't in a group of any kind. Technically. And if you really want to shave down that number more, you can put everyone in the passes tier into a sub-legendary category, a term that I already think is kind of weird because it kind of undermines what legendary means, but you can say that there are 26 legendary Pokemon and then 30 sub-legendaries. But I think 56 is better. If we're going by generation, then I'd have to say that Generation 4 is probably the most legendary, and Generation 9 is the least legendary. You know what, screw it, here's a list. So, what are the big takeaways from this? There are only 56 actual legendary Pokemon. The rest are fakers. Just about every little floating legendary or mythical Pokemon is a psychic type. And most of them should be fairy. And Pokemon such as Latios, Cobalion, and Pecharunt are all less special than a Ditto. Thanks for watching. Bye.